It started like any other shift. 2017 a.m. That hour when the world feels suspended, not asleep, not awake, just still. The kind of silence that hums in your ears if you listen too closely. Inside the 911 dispatch center, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled like old coffee and recycled air. A few monitors glowed in the dark, casting pale blue reflections across tired faces. Most of the city was quiet. And then the phone rang. Line 3. The dispatcher on duty that night, her name was Elaine Carter, almost didn't remember picking it up years later. But she remembered what she heard, not words. Breathing. Shallow, uneven, like someone trying not to make noise. She pressed her headset closer. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Then a whisper, so faint it barely registered. I think someone's in my house. You can hear it in the archive recording even today, the tremor in the voice. Not dramatic, not screaming, just controlled fear, the kind where someone is trying very hard not to let panic spill out. Elaine straightened in her chair. Okay, she said calmly. What's your address? There was a pause, a small hitch in the caller's breathing. 1428 Willow Creek Drive. Elaine typed quickly. Residential area. Quiet neighborhood. No recent reports. No flagged history. Are you alone in the house? Another pause. I think so. Think. That word still bothers investigators. Because if you're alone, you know. And if you don't know, that means something else. Elaine lowered her voice. Why do you think someone is there? A soft sound, almost like fabric brushing against a phone. I heard footsteps. Where are you now? In my bedroom. Is the door locked? Yes. A small exhale. Relief, maybe. But then, wait. The word barely escaped the caller's lips. Elaine froze. What is it? Silence again? But not empty silence. This one felt crowded. And then the caller whispered, the handle just moved. The recording captures something chilling here. You don't hear the handle. You don't hear a bang. You don't hear a forced entry. You hear breathing. Two sets. The caller's and something else. Faint, distant, but present. Elaine didn't catch it in real time. She was focused on protocol. Officers are on the way, she said quickly. Stay on the line with me. Do not open the door. The caller didn't respond, just breathing. Then, a slow creak. Not loud, not violent, just the soft sound of pressure on wood. Elaine's pulse spiked. Are you still there? She asked. A whisper came back. He's inside. Not someone, not I think. He. And then something happened that still unsettles people who study the recording. The caller began speaking, but not to the dispatcher, to someone in the room. No, I didn't call anyone, the voice whispered. Elaine's blood ran cold. Mom, stay with me. What's happening? There was a pause. And then the caller's tone changed completely. It flattened, lost its tremor. No, the voice said. Calm. Almost gentle. You're not supposed to be here. Elaine frowned. That wasn't directed at her. The dispatcher leaned forward. Mom, who is with you? Another long pause. Then a muffled sound, like a hand covering the phone. The next sound was unmistakable. A thud. Heavy. Followed by something scraping across the floor. Elaine stood up in her cubicle, heart racing. Ma'am. The line didn't disconnect. It stayed open. For 47 more seconds. 47 seconds of audio investigators would later analyze frame by frame. You hear movement, a dragging noise, and then a man's voice, low, calm, close to the phone. You shouldn't have done that. The line went dead. Police arrived 6 minutes later. The front door was locked. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No disturbed landscaping. Inside, the house was neat, almost untouched. Until they reached the bedroom, the door was closed, unlocked. The room looked undisturbed at first glance. Bed made, lamp on, phone on the nightstand, but the caller, Emily Harper, 27 years old, was gone. No blood, no signs of struggle. Nothing overturned, just absence. Her phone was still connected to the dispatcher's line when officers picked it up, the call timer still ticking. 20 years later, investigators still replay that call, because here's what makes it different. The breathing. When forensic audio experts enhanced the recording years later, they confirmed something unsettling. There were 3 distinct breathing patterns on that call: the dispatcher, Emily, and someone else. And here's what makes it worse. The 3rd breathing pattern was present before Emily said someone was inside, meaning whoever was in that room may have already been there, listening, while she was on the phone. Police canvassed the neighborhood. Nothing. No witnesses, no cars seen leaving, no surveillance footage. The house showed no signs of forced entry, and no hidden access points were ever found. But there was one detail investigators didn't release to the public for years. When officers checked the bedroom closet, it was empty, except for one thing: a single shoe. Emily's, placed neatly in the center of the floor, not thrown, not dropped, placed like someone wanted it to be found. Her car was still in the driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter, her wallet untouched. No financial activity, no ransom demand, no body, just a 911 call, and a voice on the other end that didn't belong. Over the years, detectives have had theories: a stalker, someone she knew, a break-in gone wrong. But nothing fits cleanly. Because if someone broke in, how did they get in without leaving a trace? If she knew them, why the whisper? Why the fear? And if this was planned, why stay on the line? Why let the dispatcher hear anything at all? There's one more thing about that call. At timestamp 021843, just 3 seconds before the thud, you can hear Emily whisper something. It's so faint that even enhanced, it's barely audible. But audio experts believe she said, "You were under my bed." Under my bed. Police checked it that night. Nothing there, but the thought never left the investigators. Because if someone had been in that room before she even locked the door, then the call wasn't the beginning. It was the end, and for 20 years that 47-second stretch of audio has haunted everyone who's heard it. Because the last confirmed sound of Emily Harper alive was not a scream, not a struggle, just a quiet realization: he's inside. And then silence. The morning after Emily disappeared, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a question. Yellow tape wrapped around the front porch. Patrol cars idled at the curb. Neighbors stood in clusters across the street, arms folded tight against the cold, whispering theories that grew more dramatic with every retelling. But inside, investigators weren't whispering. They were listening, over and over again. 2017 a.m. Click 911, what's your emergency? The tape rolled. Detective Marcus Hale had been on homicide for 12 years at that point. He had seen things that most people couldn't imagine. But something about this call unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was intimate, like the caller hadn't realized she was being hunted until the last possible second. Hale stood in the small evidence room while the recording played through studio-grade headphones. He didn't blink when the whisper came through. "I think someone's in my house." He paused it, rewound, played it again. You could hear more than fear in her voice. There was confusion, like something didn't make sense. As if her instincts were trying to piece together something her brain hadn't fully accepted yet. The forensics team had already swept the house. No fingerprints that didn't belong, no fibers out of place, no forced entry, no damaged locks. The windows were sealed from the inside. The security system turned off, but not disabled. Emily had never activated it that night. That detail bothered Hale. Why lock your bedroom door but not turn on your alarm system? He pressed play again. When Emily whispered the handle just moved, Hale slowed the playback speed. He listened for the handle. There it was. Barely audible. A faint metal click, like someone testing it gently, not trying to break in, just checking. And then came the breathing. At first it was almost impossible to separate from background noise, but once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. A second inhale, deeper, slower, not panicked, controlled. Hale leaned back in his chair, enhanced the background frequencies, he told the audio tech. The technician adjusted filters, isolating low tones, and suddenly the room felt colder. There it was, breathing that didn't match Emily's rhythm. And it didn't match the dispatcher's either. It was closer to the phone, which meant closer to Emily, before she ever said someone was inside. Hale felt something tighten in his chest. If that third person was already in the room, then Emily hadn't heard someone break in. She had heard someone move. There's a difference. Police tore the house apart over the next 48 hours. They opened walls, they checked vents, they examined crawl spaces. Nothing. No hidden entry point, no footprints in the yard, not even displaced dust on the window frames. And yet a woman had vanished from a locked house. The neighbors were interviewed. Most reported nothing unusual, but one detail surfaced. Around 1050 a.m., the neighbor across the street thought she saw a light flicker in Emily's bedroom window. Not turn on. Flicker. Like something momentarily passed in front of it. She assumed it was a curtain shifting. Now she wasn't so sure. Detective Hale started digging into Emily's life. On paper, it was unremarkable. Marketing assistant, recently promoted, lived alone for 2 years. No criminal record, no restraining orders, no recent breakups. But her phone records showed something curious. For 3 weeks before she vanished, she had received repeated calls from a blocked number. Late at night. Always between 1:30 and 2 a.m. She never answered. The calls never left voicemails, but on the night she disappeared, there was no blocked call, just the 911 dial, which meant whoever entered that house didn't announce themselves first, or didn't need to. When investigators looked at her computer, they found search history from 2 days earlier. Can someone hide in your house without you knowing? Footsteps in attic but no attic access. How long can someone stay under a bed? Hale stared at the screen. She had known something was wrong, but she hadn't told anyone. No texts to friends, no messages to family, nothing. It was like she didn't want to seem paranoid. The audio team continued analyzing the call, and that's when they found something new. At timestamp 02:18:39, 4 seconds before the heavy thud, there's the whisper layered beneath the audio. It doesn't belong to Emily. It doesn't belong to the dispatcher. It's male. Almost too soft to catch. 3 words. We've been here. Not I. We. Hale listened to it a dozen times. Each time the same chill crawled up his spine. Who was we? Was it plural? Or was it something else? An echo, an artifact of sound distortion. Audio experts debated for months. Some insisted it was pareidolia, your brain trying to find words in static. Others were certain. There was a second voice, possibly a third. Then came the detail that fractured the case wide open. Crime scene reprocessing revealed something overlooked the first night. A faint indentation in the carpet beside the bed, as if someone had been kneeling there for an extended period. The fibers were compressed deeper than the surrounding area, but there were no clear knee prints, just pressure, like weight. And that indentation was older than the night she vanished. Forensic analysis estimated it had been there at least several days, which meant someone may have been in that bedroom before the call, watching, waiting. Hale couldn't shake a single image from his mind. Emily sleeping in her bed, unaware, and someone beneath her, or beside her, in the dark, listening to her breathe. When the media got wind of the enhanced tape, the story exploded. Headlines called it the bedroom listener. Talk shows debated whether the voice was real. Online forums dissected every second of audio, but public attention didn't bring answers. It brought noise. False confessions flooded in. Psychics claimed to see forests and rivers and shallow graves. One anonymous letter arrived at the station. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. 3 words. She wasn't alone. Handwriting analysis turned up nothing conclusive. The ink was generic, the paper common, but it echoed the tape. Hale kept the letter in his desk drawer, not because it was solid evidence, but because something about it felt connected. As months turned into years, the case grew colder. No body, no ransom, no financial trail, no activity on her identity. It was as if Emily Harper had dissolved into air. And yet, that call remained, a 47-second window into something that should not have been possible, and every time Hale replayed it, one question lingered heavier than the rest. If someone was already in that room, why wait until she called 911? Why not act sooner? Unless they didn't realize she knew. Unless the call itself triggered something. 20 years later, Detective Hale still keeps a copy of the recording. He says there's a moment most people miss, right after Emily whispers, "You're not supposed to be here." There's a pause, and in that pause, you hear something small, a soft, almost affectionate chuckle, not loud, not mocking, just close, like someone amused. And that sound, more than the thud, more than the whisper, is what still wakes him up at night, because fear is loud, but confidence is quiet, and whoever was in that room was not afraid. 20 years is supposed to be enough time for answers, enough time for someone to talk, enough time for guilt to slip, enough time for a mistake, but some cases don't age. They settle into the bones of the people who carry them. Detective Marcus Hale retired 8 years ago. His hair turned silver, his posture slightly bent. But there's one thing that hasn't changed. The small locked fireproof box in the bottom drawer of his desk at home. Inside it, a copy of the 911 recording, the anonymous letter, and a photograph no one outside the original investigative team has ever seen. The photograph wasn't dramatic, it wasn't bloody, it wasn't chaotic. It was quiet. Too quiet. It was taken the morning after Emily disappeared. Crime scene techs had photographed every inch of that bedroom. Standard procedure: walls, windows, door frame. Under the bed. And the bed. Perfectly made. Except for one thing. On Emily's pillow, barely noticeable unless you knew what you were looking for, was a slight depression, not from her head, from something else. The indentation was at the top edge of the pillow, as if someone had rested their chin there, watching her while she slept. Forensic measurements later confirmed the pressure pattern didn't match Emily's height or sleeping position. It was positioned higher, leaning inward, like someone kneeling beside the bed. That detail was never released to the public, because if the public knew, the panic would have been uncontrollable. For years, investigators chased every possible lead: stalkers from her past, co-workers, delivery drivers, utility workers, anyone who had access to the property in the previous 6 months. Nothing stuck until year 7. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a body. It was something smaller, a break-in, 2 states away. A woman woke up at 3:11 a.m. to find her bedroom door slightly open. She lived alone. Alarmed. No forced entry. Nothing was stolen. Nothing disturbed. Except one thing. Her closet door was open, and on her nightstand, her phone moved closer to the edge. Police initially dismissed it as a failed burglary, but when they canvassed the area, they discovered 2 more reports in the same county. Women living alone, no forced entry, no theft, just subtle displacement. A window unlatched, a cabinet opened, a chair slightly turned, and in one case, a 911 call. The caller hung up before speaking. Dispatch recorded only breathing. 2 patterns, one panicked, one steady. That's when someone in that county connected the dots and reached out to Hale. He flew out the next week, older now, slower, but sharper than ever. He listened to the new 911 recording in a small sheriff's office conference room. It wasn't identical, but it was close enough to make his pulse spike. The controlled breathing, the silence that felt occupied, and then the softest sound, a shift in weight, like someone adjusting their balance in a crouched position. Hale didn't say much during that visit, but on the flight home, he replayed Emily's call again, and for the first time in 20 years, he noticed something new. Right after Emily says, "You're not supposed to be here," there's a faint rustle, not fabric, not footsteps. Breathing changes. The third pattern becomes closer, higher, elevated, as if whoever was there stood up. Which means, until that moment, they may not have been standing at all. They may have been lower, closer to the ground, under the bed, or kneeling beside it, waiting. Hale began consulting behavior analysts. The emerging profile was disturbing. This wasn't about theft. It wasn't even necessarily about murder. It was about proximity, control, the thrill of being present without being detected. An intruder who entered quietly, remained hidden, listened, possibly for hours, maybe longer. There's a term for offenders who embed themselves in personal spaces like that. Phantom intruders. They don't break things. They don't leave obvious damage. They invade invisibly, and sometimes they stay. One analyst proposed a theory that still unsettles everyone who hears it. What if Emily wasn't taken immediately? What if she was subdued, renewed quietly, and the house relocked from inside using knowledge of the structure? But that theory had holes. No signs of struggle, no trace evidence, until year 14. A storage unit in a neighboring state went up for auction after the renter died in a car accident. Inside the unit, furniture, boxes, old electronics, and a small hard drive. The renter's name wasn't immediately connected to Emily's case. He had no criminal record beyond minor trespassing charges as a teenager. But when police powered up the drive, they found something that stopped them cold. Audio files, dozens of them, labeled only by dates. Each file was several hours long, and most were silent, but not completely. In the background of many recordings, breathing, soft movements, occasional shifts in fabric. The files appeared to be recordings taken inside bedrooms. Unaware victims sleeping. Police managed to identify 3 of the rooms through daycar and background noise. The women were alive. They had never known someone had been there. Until now. One file was corrupted, dated the same week Emily disappeared. It was only 49 seconds long. The first 2 seconds were static, then breathing, 2 patterns, then 3, and then a whisper. "You're not supposed to be here." Hale felt the room spin when he heard it. The voice wasn't Emily's, it was mimicking her, replaying her words, as if whoever recorded it had listened to the 911 call afterward and kept it, like a souvenir. But the most chilling detail wasn't the mimicry. It was what came next. A soft laugh, the Hale's soft, almost affectionate chuckle, identical in tone to the one buried in the original 911 recording. Audio analysts confirmed with 87% probability that the chuckle in both files came from the same person. 87% isn't certainty, but it's close enough to haunt you. The renter of the storage unit had lived within 15 miles of Emily 20 years ago. He had worked as a subcontracted cable technician. He had access to homes, attics, crawl spaces, security systems. He moved states 3 months after Emily vanished. No one thought twice about it at the time. When investigators exhumed his past, they discovered something else. Several complaints filed over the years. Women reporting the unsettling feeling of being watched. Locks that seemed slightly misaligned. Items subtly moved. Nothing provable. Nothing chargeable. Just discomfort. He died before police connected him formally to the Harper case. Which means, if he was responsible, there will never be a confession. No trial. No courtroom closure. Only audio. Only breath. Hale visited Emily's parents one last time after the hard drive was analyzed. They were older now. Grief had softened into something quieter, but it never left their eyes. He told them what they needed to know. Not everything, just enough. Outside their house, Hale sat in his car for a long time, because even with a likely suspect, the case still felt unfinished. There was no body, no confirmed crime scene, just a recording and a bedroom that looked untouched. Sometimes at night, Hale still plays the tape, not because he wants to, but because he needs to remind himself it was real, that Emily wasn't imagining it, that the fear in her whisper meant something. And every time he reaches that final stretch, the heavy thud, the scraping, the voice that says, "You shouldn't have done that," he thinks about something else, something small, something most people overlook. The dispatcher stayed on the line for 47 seconds after the thud, but the total open line recording lasted 52 seconds, 5 seconds unaccounted for. 5 seconds of audio that were corrupted beyond repair. 5 seconds no one has ever heard. And sometimes, late at night, Hale wonders what was in those 5 seconds. A struggle, a whisper, or something worse, something calm. Because if there's one thing 20 years taught him, it's that monsters don't always crash through doors. Sometimes they're already inside, listening, waiting, breathing quietly in the dark. And the only proof they were ever there is a voice on a phone line that